The Saudi Pro League was founded in 1976, but it's only in the last few months where it's caused a fuss around the football world, with top transfers like Ronaldo, Neymar and Didier Ndong. So why is it creating a fuss? And why are we in England apparently so angry at what's happening in the Gulf? And what the hell is a public investment fund with their apparent plans to
dominate the world?
Stick around to find out. Firstly, it's a good idea to understand what the Public Investment Fund is. It's a fund used to invest on behalf of the Saudi government, which sounds quite obvious, but ultimately it finances projects that might be significant to the development of Saudi Arabia, or the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia to give the country its full name. It's controlled by Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, who for all intents and purposes is the leader of Saudi Arabia and one of the most powerful people in the world. And we're not talking rookie numbers with the PIF either. It's one of the largest sovereign investment funds in the world, with assets valued over $700 billion and with stakes in companies like Uber, Facebook, Boeing, Citigroup, Disney, Bank of America and BP. It's also trying to take over the gaming world with stakes in Capcom, Activision Blizzard, Nintendo and EA among others. And just like a video game, they've activated a cheat code to buy everything. But despite being one of the biggest funds, they're also one of the dodgiest, as I'll come to shortly. Before we talk about specifics as well as the obvious, it's also important to understand why now. Well, all these changes are part of the Saudis' plan called Vision 2030, which is their plan to diversify an economy which has been over-reliant on oil production by, well, 2030. The end goal being to attract foreign visitors, investment and status within the world. And it's interesting that they want more visitors, as Saudi Arabia is already within the top 20 most visited countries in the world, mainly for religious pilgrimages. But as part of this plan, the fund has looked to sport to invest in. Until recent years, the fund wasn't allowed to invest outside the country, but now they've taken full advantage. It started in 2021 with the takeover of Newcastle United, but even that wasn't really straightforward. It was a process that took 18 months due to various obstacles, such as opposition from the league's other 19 clubs, and one of the biggest reasons being that beIN, who were Qatari owned and had the Premier League rights in the Middle East, were blocked from broadcasting in Saudi Arabia due to a long-running feud between the two countries. This was said to be the main reason for the Premier League blocking the takeover, because money. And when this ban was lifted, the fund completed the purchase. Since then, Newcastle have gone on to be quite decent actually, finishing 4th last season and getting to the Champions League for the first time in yonks. So where do the teams in Saudi Arabia come into it? Well, I'll tell you. The Newcastle thing was back in 2021 by the time it was completed. In June this year, the fund also completed the takeover of 4 teams in the Saudi Pro League, those being Al Ittihad, last season's champs, Al Nassr, Ronnie's new club, Al Hilal, Neymar's new stomping ground, or is that diving ground, and Al Ahly, who recently bounced straight back up after their first ever relegation. This was also coincided with the league expanding from 16 to 18 teams, and many fans are excited by the changes, and why wouldn't they be? It's good for the sport, introducing stars into a league which has never really previously had any. The fans are happy, the government's happy, the leaders are happy, everyone's happy, right? No. Let's address the elephant in the room. The main criticism is of Saudi's records, particularly around human rights. People are still killed in the country for holding deviant beliefs, women's rights are still questionable, and Saudi Arabia is responsible for the high-profile killing of Jamal Khashoggi in 2018. The journalist was outspoken against the Saudi government and fled to Turkey, where one day he walked into the Saudi consulate and never came out again, the full details of which are probably too grisly for YouTube. Prince MBS was later asked if he ordered the killing, and he said obviously not, which he would do. I mean, who would admit that? He's not going to say, yeah, I did it, mate. But he then confirmed that the killers were indeed working for the Saudi government, and the killers were flown to Turkey on a plane owned by PIF. But at least that doesn't harm their reputation, or at least that's what Carve Communications would have you believe, the company which was paid $120,000 a month to repair Saudi reputation after the assassination. The eagle-eyed or eared among you will notice that Ronaldo signed in December, 6 months before the PIF takeover and around 6 minutes after an explosive interview with Piers Morgan, where he basically said he hated the manager and the owners and basically everybody. So how were Al Nassr able to afford him? Well, they got by with a little help from their friends, receiving cash from the tourism board, Visit Saudi, and the Saudi media company, SMC. The reason for this is that Ronnie could be used to promote the country's tourism, which is ironically something the other GOAT, Lionel Messi, already does. You'll notice that Visit Saudi was also very prominent during his unveiling in January. All this is coming from the PACE programme, or the Player Acquisition Centre of Excellence programme, and the Sports Ministry also committed to around $800 million to help with recruitment across all squads this summer, which has helped players outside of the PIF clubs such as Al Nassr, as they were at the time, and Al Ittihad, who helped sign Ronaldo and Henderson. Not to forget about Steven Gerrard, who is somehow comfortably in the top 5 best paid managers on the planet. And to highlight just how much Slippy G wanted the job, he got sacked by Villa, applied for a job at 2 clubs in the Championship, which were rejected. Then he moved over to Saudis. It was the best thing on the table at the time. Then there's their record, or lack of, with same-sex relationships. Saudi Arabia still sanctions people under Sharia law for this. And Henderson, who was a big supporter of LGBT rights, was roundly criticised for his move to the country, which ended with his rainbow armband being censored when they announced his signing on Twitter, or X or whatever it's called this week. And this is where the big claim of Saudi sportswashing comes into play. The main claims around that are the top players playing in the league would improve the Saudi image, and that we forget all about that silly inconsequential stuff like assassinations and rights. The PACE programme and general recruitment across the league is now the responsibility of Chelsea's ex, Michael Emenalo, who was their ex-technical director. He claims that there is a narrative that there's something wrong with the Saudi Pro League or with Saudi Arabia in general, and he dismisses all criticism. So why these 4 clubs? Quite simply, the fan bases and success of these clubs. Despite our hardly only just been promoted, they're one of the most successful teams in the country and have otherwise spent their entire history in the top flight. Al Hilal themselves have only just been able to sign players, having been banned from signing anyone for 2 years due to contract issues with midfielder Mohammed. And even before the takeover, they're expected to have a big clear out anyway, ready to challenge for titles again. And I suppose it helps bringing in players like Neymar, Milinkovic-Savic, Malcolm, Koulibaly, Mitrovic, Ruben Neves and Bono. No, not that one. That's the one. The Champs Al Ittihad were obvious targets to their success, and then there's Al Nassr, who were top when Ronaldo joined but finished second, so the less said about that the better. All have passionate fans in common, just like Newcastle, a big factor in the takeovers. Now believe it or not, the Saudi teams are quite competitive continentally. In fact, Al Hilal have won the AFC Champions League a record 4 times and played in another 5 finals. They're also the first Saudi team to reach the Club World Cup final, which they did last year, losing 5-3 to Real Madrid. The league has been on the rise for a short while and attendances are up massively over the last 5 years, and last season they recorded their highest ever attendances, although it's unclear how much of that came after Ronaldo signing. But just for perspective, the average attendance last season was just over 10,000, compared to over 40,000 in the Premier League and Bundesliga, which isn't bad to watch the same team win all the time. But the divide between the PIF clubs and the rest of the league is considerably bigger than other leagues. For example, the Premier League remains competitive despite millions pumped into clubs like Man City. Brentford highlighting this by being the only clubs with a league double over them last year. Over in the Pro League, Al Ahly finished top of the 2nd division by only 4 points over Al Hazm. This year, they already look light years apart, but the Saudis hope to address this with further top players being attracted to the league and playing for any one of the 18 teams. But they'll have to stay within the league rules, which allows each club to have no more than 8 foreign players. So what have we learned about PIF? Well, it was created in 1971, just before the league was. It's apparently responsible for over 500,000 jobs and just the one murder, but they've been described as one of the least transparent sovereign wealth funds in the world. They also created the LIV Golf tournament, with LIV being the Roman numeral for 54, which refers to golfing terminology I won't bore you with, but in short, the tournament has increased prize monies over the PGA, and many pro golfers have taken part, one of them being Phil Mickelson, who said that, quote, Saudi are scary mother to be involved with, which didn't stop him joining the tournament. But haven't we seen all this somewhere before? Back in the 2016-17 season, the Chinese Super League went mad with their dad's credit card and was the biggest spender in world football during that winter transfer window, shortly before it all went tits up. I mean, Carlos Tevez moved over there and earned $820,000 a week, and with his 4 goals in the year means that each goal cost Shanghai Shenhua about $10 million each. The Chinese government then decides to wake up and put a stop to it all. What's to say that that won't happen in Saudi Arabia? Well, firstly, there's more cash, and secondly, there's more of a plan, with the Vision 2030 and PACE programme. As a result, 8 of the top 10 highest paid players in the world now play in Saudi Arabia, including the top 4 paid players in the world. But that's no surprise when players like Jordan Henderson are on over €750,000 a week, which means his wage isn't much less, in football terms anyway, than Leo Messi. Don't get me wrong, top player, great captain, but €40 million a year worthy. I'll leave you to work that one out. It remains to be seen how the current season will pan out. Al Ittihad are reigning champions and top of the league again as I record this, with their manager Nuno Espirito Santo clearly bringing his winning mentality from Spurs 8 months after his sacking. But what about the players who made the leap? Matches are played in 30-odd degree heat, despite many kickoffs being late, many being 9 PM, with reports of fans collapsing in the stands and Alan Saint-Maximin claiming it's difficult to play in the heat. The heat is stifling competitiveness, the full effects of which we'll see in the long term. Many of these players simply not used to playing in such heat. it. The reality is that Saudi Arabia has been on the rise in football terms for a while. We just haven't seen it coming. FIFA President Gianni Infantino may snuggle up with Saudi top dogs, but he may have just seen Saudi Arabia's rise before anyone else. Since Saudi Arabia's first appearance at the World Cup in 1994, where Saeed Al Awairan scored both one of the greatest goals and one of the flukiest goals in World Cup history thanks to Belgium's supposed defence, they've played in every tournament except 2 since. So they've appeared at World Cups and won the Asian Cup 3 times, FIFA Arab Cup twice, and in 1992 were runners-up in the Confederations Cup, which used to be organised and held in Saudi Arabia and used to be called the King Fahd Cup after the Saudi king, before changing names to the Confederations Cup, and I bet you didn't know that, did you? They gained a bit of international recognition from these and moved on to hosting. They'll be hosting the Club World Cup in December, the Asian Cup in 2027 and the Asian Winter Games in 2029, with other bids for other tournaments elsewhere, chief among which is the World Cup in 2034, which they're among the favourites to win. Hosting, that is, not the whole tournament. Qatar have proved that the World Cup can be hosted in that part of the world, major advantage for Saudi Arabia being that they have a track record in the tournament. They've also hosted club tournaments with the Italian Super Cup held there a few times, as well as their Spanish Super Cup. Stadiums have or will be renovated, and it's all part of their long-term plan. Anyway, back to Infantino, the man who claims that sports and politics don't mix, yet he's guest of honour at the 2018 World Cup was Crown Prince MBS. Saudi friend. The man who had a secret scheme to sell media rights to finance plans for a global nations league and expanded Club World Cup until a UEFA backlash and then COVID stopped everything. Not even mentioning that much of the money was going to come from SoftBank, whose biggest investors include Saudi Arabia. And it was the Saudis suggesting to host the World Cup every 2 years before the backlash on that too, and rightly so. As it happens, the Club World Cup was expanded anyway and will launch in its new form in 2025, but won't be hosted in Saudi Arabia as planned, but will be hosted by the US of A. So what of the Saudi national team? Their whole squad in last year's World Cup were based at home, with Argentina slayer Salman Al-Dosari playing for Al Hilal. There's no reason for them to move abroad with the financial strength and cultural ties of the domestic league, and so it shows with a slew of new top signings with all this new money. But sports and politics have always mixed, regardless of whether we agree with it or not. In the late 20s, Benito Mussolini saw the important role sport plays in politics, and the Serie A as we know it today was founded shortly afterwards. Italy players were even seen doing the fascist salute in the 1934 World Cup. The Saudi plan is to invest, tick, attract star players, tick, start to build off the pitch expertise of managers and backroom staff, tick, and for their 4 teams to increase success and drive the league to one of the top 10 leagues in the world, at least in terms of revenue. Star players bring in attention and broadcast rights, as evidenced by Ronaldo's highlights being everywhere since his move. I mean, seriously, can you ever remember seeing any Saudi Pro League highlights before that? And these rights then in turn bring in sponsors and kit deals, with Al Nassr just securing a kit deal with Nike, or Nike, however it's pronounced. Rinse and repeat. That's the plan. But on a final note, the clubs will have to get their shit in order. Saudi clubs have never been very professional, as they haven't needed to be. Debts are often just wiped by the state. For example, in 2018, MBS gave 300 billion quid, or the Saudi equivalent. I mean, I highly doubt he used pound sterling, because that would just be silly and not at all convenient, just to clear the collective debts of all the top tier teams, and their troubles just disappeared. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this video, or at least found it informative. Hopefully I've covered all bases. Obviously I could have gone a bit further in depth with some of this, but that would just be boring and unnecessary, and I aim to please. If you enjoyed it, consider giving a like. If you didn't, then just consider abusing me in the comments. I'm thick-skinned and I can take it. But whatever you decide to do, until then, see you next time.